changed the structure to first five our three presenters. We will have one talk after the other, then time for Q's and A's, and afterwards we will have Maestro William that will also give an impulse at the talk, and then we would like to ask all of you to join in a large discussion. Okay, so this is the way we move on. Christine will present our three presenters. I will be sitting there and only giving time instruction as time is short. And Christine, please.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have the honor to introduce our guest today. As Sebastian mentioned before, we had this idea to have a panel, but then we decided to divide the panel into two. But we will have the same guest also for the next panel. And at first, we are having the presentation of Professor Felipe Trota from the Universidad Fluminense from Brazil. This university is one of our partner universities for the Interdisciplinary Center for Global Social Studies, and he has been also joining us along all these years. Also been here for some other spring academies and other events here. We are really happy to have you. I also have to mention that Felipe and other musicians, we are having a surprise for you this evening. Also, don't miss this concert over in the in Taco Park Lake. You are all welcome, and please, I hope you see you there. And after Felipe, we are having okay, sorry. We are having the presentation of Tom Peterson. Tom is one of the Tom is part of the Manson project together with Professor Carola Roria in another college that are also here. Thank you so much for your support, and also thank you for accepting our invitation. We are really happy to get to know your project as well. Tom is one of our also postdocs colleagues in this university, and we're also really happy to learn from you. And at the end, we are having the presentation of also a new member of the university. You're welcome, Mahmoud. Thank you. He's also, I am so really happy to have him here because he also is a part of our indigenous community in India. And he will also be joining us later. So really, thank you also for your support, for sharing your experience with us, and I hope you enjoy. And also, we are having stuff, of course. Yes.
I won't say a word.
Thank you first of all for the invitation. I've been on this team for Global South Sudan in 2017, the first time I came to Chile. And I've been coming to Chile the same for almost every year. So it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here and very glad to see how this time, particularly this town, has appeared as an emerging topic for discussion, for debates about how, for debates about the heritage, sustainability, wisdom. And this idea is, I've been bringing up this since the beginning, because all of this music, I think that's the only way I entered the academy and so it's very interesting to see how this topic has developed periodically. Well, my presentation here is structured in a way I usually advise my students to do, which is first some theoretical issues and concepts, and then the case study. I hate this, but for the way it came out, it may be beautiful. The first somehow it had to do with this kind of hermetic kind of long title. I came with this title and I need to explain something different. First of all, the concept of technology. We need a way to replace the very part of the table, the idea of soundscape. And something that we time more, we time less with the idea of soundscape, other terms that appear to understand sound. Epistemology is more defined by epistemologists analysis, and according to him, it is a way to join acoustics with epistemology to understand sound ethnology. A topic that involves being a money. Lots of talks in this area. According to him, the word treated by primary substances is I think very interesting. Takes an category such human, plants, animals, materials. Rather, it is constituted relational through the acknowledgement of conjunctions and entanglement among all co-present and historically accumulated forms. My approach to epistemology is to take it a kind of shortcut to inquire about music in social life. What is the role of music in our daily life interactions? And what's the importance of music as a way of thinking and being? I think the work of Rama Prakash yesterday addresses the same set of ideas while talking about music. Okay, put them on. But other concept. When we when we is a concept that's developed by indigenous groups and like a philosophy that basically it's a way to understanding the life as something relational. That is, each living being is always integrated with other living and non-living beings, as well as the environment, spirituality, memory, future projections, and so on. So that is a kind of idea of how one could keep it well, the good living. It began to be used, it's important, in Latin American researchers, thinkers in the 20th century, and as a way to keep political and ecological agendas. According to the biologist and ecologist Eduardo Puginas, which is one of the thinkers, or one of the intellectuals, when the view combines two ideas, core ideas. First, a critique of the economic concept of development. As development is a thing that is a name of politics, both in the right and left. Development is taken as something important. And second, so when the view is something to challenge this, and as well as propose alternatives. To propose alternatives that could redefine social and environmental relativity. My approach to Buen Vivir is through the idea of the work of René Ramirez, but not here, but here. And it's something interesting about our network. I became to know his work through one of international forums or something we organized within this network. He gave a lecture and got contact with his work. From his perspective, the struggle for better living conditions that are usually framed through the idea of well-being. But well-being is connected with the idea of development. This way of thinking of well-being usually takes money as the fundamental issue to be addressed. So what he proposed is that we could perhaps shift our value towards time as the fundamental value. So he proposed that time could be a more humanistic and precise element to measure and to achieve a better quality of life. Not purchase and consumption, but how each person distributes their time. And his answer is the time that represents the time of good living is relational time, which is time we relate with others. In Spanish, it's tiempo relacionado, much good compliment that for relational time. Okay. What is the time relational? Basically, he addresses the time for leisure, love in terms of emotional and erotic sexual as well, friendship, construction of social relationships, public participation, time for well, nature, living with nature, contemplating and establishing connection with nature. We are going to come back to this idea of tiempo relacionado and when we hear, but now the third idea, views and what has to do with music. A classic postulate of ethnomusicology, coined by ethnomusicologists, classical ethnomusicologists, British ethnomusicologists, Ron Blacking, he stated in a very famous work that music is the human organization of sound. It's a classic postulate that is spread all over this college. Later, at the end of the 90s, Puerto Rican sociologist Angel Quintero Rivera launched a written book about sound, where he tried to think about, he takes this idea of blacking, music as organization of sound, but he goes further and saying music might be the organization of time itself. Quote. Like other beautiful perceptions, scholars felt taste, sounds necessarily entail an element of time. They are physical vibrations, and their nature is defined by the intensity with which they occur within a temporal space. The human organization of sound or music, is also a way to organize, express, and symbolize. In other words, people construct relations of diachrony and synchrony that shape the ways of being together, thinking about the past and projecting futures across through music. Depending on how the sonic organization, this organization of sound happens, different ways of interpreting and giving meaning to time are constructed as well. He has a very complex and brilliant as well interpretation of how the sound organization happens. He works with rhythm, how syncopated rhythm deal with colonization, and how this might be a reinterpretation of the body of the real environment. At no time, the basket will be go through this. Going further, the temporal organization of time manifests itself. I just quoted. Manifest the body. That's something very important. It's through the body that this temporary organized sound is activated, is transformed, and is experienced. This happens in time. The duration of a musical event and the symbolic duration, the actual duration in terms of minutes, hours, and the symbolic duration, for instance, of a festival, a celebration, a ritual, and also the individual moment in which we are together with the music, constructing things. Music always activates some idea of collective and a symbolic framework that through the body and through, when I say the body, I say both the vibrational and synchronization that our body moves according to sonic stimulus, especially if you recognize it is organization somehow. And also the body as a fact, how we symbolize and get touch. John Black states music is a form of touch and action in the world. Of, it is a way of thinking through music. If you go to the page of my research group at Duke, there is the kind of a figure. It's a form of action and thought in words. I realized that I think that postulates and things like challenge because it's hard to define and to understand and to grasp how music might be a form of art. Not clear. Action, okay. We take the body and you can imagine music as an action. But as a way of thinking, it's not so easy. So it's a challenge. Good to be challenged. Well, this brings us back to Buenu. My point is that the economy of tiempo relacional that constitutes music is not confined in large blocks of time. I mean, time for work, time for regular, relational or that. In fact, the relational time, if you think about it, is fragmented. It's fragmented throughout the day, throughout the week, and other temporal cycles. There moment that intensify and reprocess the music experience in which we experience relational time. And other moments that you usually time you are bored, you are involved with violence issues or fatigue and so on. Relational time that is composed by short moments, usually short, within a temporal space. Yet, it does provide benefit. So the accumulation of these moments may be a shortcut or a way to later. Now we come to, like I think that you prefer to do, the theory is done. So let's go to the case study, the Hodder summer. Well, Hodder summer. What's Hodder summer? Hodder summer is an event.
Video?
No.
Okay.
I don't know. It's Hodder summer. It's something difficult to translate. Usually, when most words do not translate this expression, Hodder summer. This is kind of hard circle. But it's not circle. So it means a kind of relational ambience that music is involved. So that is not to translate. Other summer is an event where people come together to play, sing, and dance. Okay, lots of music sounds like that. The description is worth of almost every music. Samba is a musical form that particularly activates ideas of collectivity, different from other genres. Samba is very keen of the idea of being collective, improvisation, informality. These are things that are very important in the imaginary process. And that's interesting. The physical arrangement of art as an event reinforces this idea. Musically, musicians usually are on the table. Musicians usually are around the table, this level. And people around. Countless usually that. Okay. There's a way of organizing space that confirms and reinforces some ideas of improvisational informatics. Mostly, this number has a duration of 3 to 5 hours. There is no pre-scheduled repertoire. When one comes to a system, we don't know what will be called. Modules, each and module. Nobody knows what's really happening in terms of repertoire. 3 minutes. Okay, let's have a taste of it. Video. This is a before. This is a video from the 70s. It's a very informal. Some of these guys became very cool. But this was before they now they get together in a backyard. This guy is very 70s. Something tradition. The next one is already. I mean, this might be and the same structure. Same will we still have but again, bring forward this group. The guy this do that. The people of musicians are you see at the table, but the audience. So some of these ideas. Okay. Just finish. It's what can I cut? I would say it's important that people, people involved with further do not talk about the character. No, I never heard of it. So they talk about this. And within that, I want to develop the progression of that. No, because there's something important to come. What is coming? However, Laura, what you working for? However.
Ah.
No. However. However, there's more. Because it's like a very romantic. Everything is fine. Not that. There are policies, which you may have noticed, the decisions are almost. That's what there are high standard theaters. There are power disputes who comes near the target, who goes far, who can train, who can bring the phone. There are lots of power disputes involved, but really there are conflicts, there are violence in the whole system, like any kind of power people have issues. So there's not always, not being so romantic. But all these things are together with this construction of temporary relation. That's my idea. And to conclude, Sebastian has said on Monday, the opening ceremony, that we here in French Academy, we're building a kind of bubble of happiness against all the violence, sadness, wars, wars. What if it's not a bubble? What if it's a moment? What do you think about time? Or if you take the bubble, what do you think about this when you did like a kind of scope? Blow it and explode each time. Provisional, short duration. And yet, very intense to produce happiness, produce well-being, or good living. That way, opposite. Music and other activities alike may produce this brief moment. Spread in the timing of the record when to be may be constructed against the order of the world, against the parent. I thought, thank you. Sorry for the time.
Yes, don't worry. So I just wanted to summarize one aspect. So this is the community, people are happy and we have tables. There must be a order somebody.
What they're not
When I go into Leeds.
So, very much needed. We have noticed this is ongoing
Yeah.
dialogue. Thank you for making us think about mapping the intensity relational types. So contribution. So I think we move for
just have a couple of technical.
okay, so shall I continue? Yes. Yeah. Actually, I I'll tell you an anecdote of my life when I went to Turkey. I was invited to give a product by Felipe and his friend. And it was somehow I always arrive at Brazil for important moments of history which do not have to do anything with me or what
Your presentation also, or not?
usually just before the election. So we from here somehow moving around and then finally guys insulting the followers of Lula, and it became very intense. But people didn't know what would happen politically afterwards. two things and water and political content. So, some people reclaim space, and it somehow became a manifestation of vision or the political identity. So I think this is, it wasn't like a kind of scenario, political conflict that was overlaying the order this time, and somehow became part of it because the way people chanted after this intervention somehow changed. You know, there was some chant with political awareness.
However,
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to, however.
Thank you. And thanks also for inviting me to take part in the roundtable today, and to Crystal and to my other participants. And thank you to all of you for being in this room with us today when it's so beautiful outside. It's very disciplined of you all. And thank you also to Felipe for setting us off with some theory. I hope you're all okay with having a bit more theory, because that's kind of where this presentation is going. So unlike Felipe, I'm going to read from a paper. I hope that's okay with everybody. And I'll try to be conscious of the time constraints as well. So in 2022, Sri Lanka entered a state of major political upheaval. The government's disastrous economic policies had led to life-threatening shortages of cash, medicine, food, and fuel, causing what became known as the Aragalya, or the struggle. The term Aragalya expresses both Sri Lanka's circumstances at that time, as well as the social response to it, which saw hundreds of thousands of protesters demonstrate for several months on end. So I'm jumping between the PowerPoint and the video here, but hopefully you can hear this. No, you can't hear this. There's a re-recording of me. Is that this YouTube stream up here? Yeah? Okay. So this rhythm that circulated during the Aragalya became an expression, a sonic expression of solidarity. The rhythm itself is a sonic reference to a particular moment in the government's fall from power, but it's also more than that. Originating from the lyrics of a 1980s film song called Kap de Kak Kak, which itself drew from an earlier piece of auditory culture, the rhythm describes that government as lowly, treacherous thieves by comparing them to crows, which have an undesirable karmic reputation in Sri Lanka. By choosing this rhythm, protesters deliberately wrote the government into a layered auditory history that enhanced the potency of their musical insult. Okay. J. Martin Daughtry likens temporally layered sound to a kind of palimpsest, a manuscript on which multiple inscriptions have been written, erased, and overwritten, resulting in a kind of entangled mesh of temporalities that, although variously and often imperfectly discernible, coexist and are brought into the present through the manuscript object. Palimpsests simultaneously store and transmit multiple temporal layers, providing material traces and substances to historic moments of inscription, erasure, and reinscription that enable a kind of textual archaeology. Daughtry uses palimpsest theory to think about aurality, using it to, quote, imagine sound and auditory experience as layered by uncovering moments of inscription and erasure that lie beneath acoustic phenomena and auditory practices. When reading physical palimpsests, these beneath or overwritten texts are described using the Latin term scriptio inferior, or underwriting. Listening to scriptio inferior, Daughtry suggests, entails listening to multiple contexts and complicated networks that precede, surround, and are brought into being by a song's performance. Through a palimpsestic listening, the performance, rearticulation, or repetition of a text, a song, or a rhythm can be heard to overwrite, encapsulate, or resound earlier performances that lie imperfectly discernible behind or within the audible foreground. Oh, sorry, hang on. If we take this rhythmic symbol of the Aragalia and its lyrical precedence as a kind of acoustic palimpsest, its earliest known underwriting appears in a series of oral transcriptions in the Hugh Neville collection of Sinhalese manuscripts in the British Library. Privately collected between 1865 and 1897 by the British colonial magistrate and administrator Hugh Neville and his clerk, Don Hendrik de Silva Gunaratnam, the Neville collection forms the largest archive of Sri Lankan manuscripts anywhere outside of Sri Lanka, including thousands of textual records of songs, sung poems, and invocations. Many of these appear on paper manuscripts transcribed by Neville and Gunaratna in person while listening to people sing, acting as a kind of audio textual recording technology that transmits situated sonic pasts. Through these wide-ranging and first-hand inscriptions, which sometimes described the text's performance and uses, the archive offers a vast repository of overlooked underwritings for songs and sounds that continue to be performed and acquire new form and meaning in Sri Lanka today. Reconnecting songs in the Neville collection with their wider social context through this lens of an acoustic palimpsest draws attention to the continued resonance of the archive's content behind, beneath, or within the present, while showing how they also form part of wider sociocultural histories. It also brings the song's later forms and lives into discussion with these underwritings, helping these records to exceed their colonial archival framing. By talking about these songs and histories with practitioners and listeners in Sri Lanka today, new voices and perspectives can be written into the wider record of these manuscripts and the archive itself, developing a route towards a more equitable and robust palimpsestic record of the Neville collection's contents. Alongside Neville and Gunaratna's collecting, Neville edited and self-funded a journal called the Taprobanian between 1885 and 1888. In an article titled Sinhalese Folklore, Neville shared 59 songs collected by him and Gunaratna, mostly by Gunaratna, that he claimed were, quote, all of ancient traditional circulation amongst Sinhalese villages, all widely known and many current everywhere amongst them. And so there we get a glimpse of the kind of folkloric, colonial epistemologies behind the collecting and the theories. From an archive of tens of thousands of songs and poems, this selection of historically popular songs offered me a practical starting point for finding resonances of the collection and its contents in the present day. During fieldwork, I met with musicians and scholars to talk about the archive, to give them copies of the article and see what they made of its contents. Although lots of the songs were familiar, I was told that many had changed and adapted to the extent that they were now very uncommon or even unknown. Through our conversations, it became clear that the archive offers rare glimpses into otherwise forgotten Sri Lankan histories of sound and music, and finding ways to reconnect them became part of my PhD project. The lyric that began Kapadukak stood out. Sudesh Mantilake, then head of performing arts at University of Peradeniya, explained the song's new anthemic political significance, which led me to focus on this text. It first appears in Gunaratna's handwriting, alongside several others that he seems to have transcribed in the same listening, collecting, transcription session. Like Kapadukak, many of these also went on to feature in Neville's Sinhalese folklore article, showing the kind of influence that Gunaratna had on Neville in his work. The transcription given in that article is a word-for-word transliteration of Gunaratna's recording, which appeared alongside an English translation and a brief description as follows. Kak, kaputu kak, gorake deng deng deng, dorakare gahe bom bom, kaputu yekate velamadulai, Kaputuye kate rang masai, Magada kanta bat malai, Vekanda kanda uding yang yang, Peli doling usi kaputa usi, which Neville translated as caw, caw, crow, caw. The gamba de tree, ding, ding, ding. The tree at the door, bom, bom. In the cockcrow's mouth is jackfruit pulp. In the hen crow's mouth is a golden coin. To eat on the road is a bag of rice. From the bund of the dam be off, be off. From the screen door be off, crow, off. Which he then gave this little description. This little rhyme is repeated to a child, patting its hand in time at the verse and winding up with a scrimmage, tossing the child up, letting it drop, and tickling it. Although there are obviously complex social and epistemological backdrops to the processes of listening, collecting, translating, hello, 4 minutes, okay, thanks, and editing that this publication entailed, Gunaratana and Neville did not explain the lyric or their methodologies further, and so if we were to follow their record alone, Kaputa Kard was not much more than a musical game. While I was on fieldwork, I had a chance to discuss the lyric with scholar and journalist Udita Devapriya and his assistant Pasandu Nimsada Tenakon. Through our conversations, a deeper contextual reading of Gunaratana's Scriptio Inferior emerged. They noticed similarities between the song's themes and a practice called Balu Kapadadania, or the dog and crow offering. Because these animals are of a low karmic status and potentially threaten the karma of others, people prepare food and offer it to disperse them and also to gain some karmic merit of their own. As Devapriya and Tennakoon pointed out, the song's Scriptio Inferior depicts crows with offerings of food and gold who are then shooed away. Devapriya compared the two, but I'm not going to read that quote out because I don't think I really have time. And I'm actually just going to skip straight forward to sorry, bear with me. I'm not sure that this is the whole paper for some reason. So I'm just going to freestyle this bit. So in 1988, about 100 years after that article was published, a film song came out that referenced this same lyric. And the genre of the film song, which I would love to play a little bit for you, so I'm going to do it. Sorry, Sebastian. I love having an excuse to play that. Okay, quick. This genre of music arrived in Sri Lanka between the 15th and mid-16th centuries with the arrival of Portuguese, Southern African and indigenous Sri Lankan populations created a fusion music called Krafrinya, later became known as Baila. It's very closely associated with taking on social elites and hegemonic politics, and so it's an inherently kind of oppositional genre, right? It's about comedy and it's about opposing malignant social elites. And in this song, in this context, Freddie Silver, the film star here, built this idea of the crow as this scavenging, dangerous, karmic creature into a Baila context, right? So 100 years after the colonial collection happens, we get another example of the song. It turns up here. Okay, let's jump to the present day or close to the present day. Okay, so 2022, the Aragalia, Sri Lanka's economy collapses. Hundreds of thousands of people are out on the street for months at a time. And this politician here, whose name is Basil Rajapaksa, used the word Kaputas in an English language interview. And so protesters pounced on the opportunity to call him Kaputa. And then they reused Freddie Silver's song as a protest chant to write that politician specifically into this musical sonic history, right? So they're rewriting that song in a way that directly insults him. Let me just see if I can just play this very quickly so that you can hear it at least. right? So it goes from being this thing that's thought of as being a game, but actually it's a ritual about dispelling crows because they're dangerous. Then it becomes a pop song that's about satire, general satire in 1980 Sri Lanka. And then in the 2022 Aragalia, this politician says Kaputa, and suddenly it becomes super relevant to bring that song, that genre, that history, that karmic iconography onto the streets to insult him directly. And by building on that auditory history, that insult became so much more powerful because it wasn't just calling him that, it was calling him something that people who knew this wider context really knew. And so it resonated in a particularly, in a specific kind of way at that time. Okay, acoustic palimpsest protest, colonial archives. The idea here with the palimpsest idea is that by thinking of these things as a palimpsest, the modern front end of the sound, the audible foreground, becomes a way of redefining the history at the back, right? We can think of this as a single sonic object that exceeds the colonial archive and is actually something out in the world. What we have in the colonial archive is just a snapshot of something that happened a long time ago that exists in the longer acoustic palimpsest of this song. Okay, I'm going to finish that.
Thank you very much. That's to the kind of intensity of the first moment, the long period of balance there. And it's highly ironic from that you just into the Nachbarstraße, and you have a colony of crows flying at the top, and they have observing you. So yeah, I might do some interviews. Yeah,
That way we can do the thing that he wants to do.
Also,
The link and return.
being observed by crows. Go ahead.
Ah, yes.
Thank you very much, Douglas. I have a little bit of a throat problem today, so let me know if you cannot hear me. I have unlike them, I have a very short PowerPoint. And also, I'm also talking about something that is absent. In the previous one. Yes. So I have kept my title, Decolonial Soundscape, which is the panel. And I am doing reflections on the ritual performances of the Kampung Naga. The Kampung Naga, the community where I am, which is in the northeastern part of India. So I've chosen the word reflections here because I am going to talk about two particular festivals that was celebrated. One was celebrated, or two festivals were celebrated traditionally, but one has now discontinued. And that is because of the intervention of colonialism. That is where I would like to discuss today. Considering the fact that there is a huge transformation in the socio-political, religious, economic status of the community, and not just that, to all the global south in that situation. It is accepted, it is also understood that there is a change. Now, to look into this change and to look into this precarity or the question of what remains and why do we choose something to remain and why do we choose some others to forget or not even brought it up for a discussion. To look into that question, which my previous panelist has already introduced, the epistemology of to know to music. Here I'm introducing here one of the lines which is commonly used used by the Tamil. It's says Lahi Janhina. Janhilan says song is a story. Story is a song. Considering the fact that if song is a story, now for the Tangals, we do not have a particular word for the music. The word la also represents music along with the lyrics. Chant is a story. Now, how do we tell a story? Now, Tamil Nagas, again, if you look at it, they are an oral narrative. They do not have a written script. So everything, every knowledge are passed down through oral narrations. If songs are not sung, how will the story remain? Now, that is where my question comes as to why one particular festival called the Tisham Festival, which was celebrated for 12 days. And this particular festival is considered as the ending of the year, or also considered as the festival of the dead. The question of death and alive comes into play because Ludo Festival is also considered as the festival of spring and also the festival of life. Now, in these two diverse points, my question is why, as a community, within the community, the same people choose only one part and forget here, or try to forget here, or even not even try to remember. The question of remembrance again comes into play, comes into an existence, isn't? When we talk about memory, when we talk about performance, when we talk about remembrance in that sense, Earl Young had mentioned that remembrance is a form of a re-performing. Taking a cue from there, if we are re-performing the Tisham, now, Tisham plays, no, let me give Tisham plays out in such a way that it was celebrated before the Christianity, it discontinued after Christianity, and why? Because one of the reasons why many of the scholars, or many of the elders especially, talk about is because it has something to do with all the religious beliefs that are involved. And now, since we are a Christian, since we are a converted Christian, we can no longer sing those songs. When we sing that song, we are also invoking the previous or the old spirits, which is not a Christian act. Now, that is why the question of, but there is no problem for a religion in that situation. And that is a trick. Not a trick. Trick is not a word, but there is a question as to why the same community choose this rather the other. And I would like to play this song. The next. The song. Now, also, as we are talking about this, I'm going to play a short song on video. I'm unable to find even a song to play that is sung during Tisham Festival. There are lyrics, 1-2 lyrics available, but I cannot find any element who is really to say, no, there is a recording of the song that is sung during this particular festival. So I'm talking about the absence here, but at the same time, even the photograph of all the archives that I have visited, I've visited the Pittsburgh Museum, which has collected a huge number of archives, photographs, objects, even Cambridge, London as well. But I have not come across any photographs on Tisham. That's one, which was taken by Ursula Brack in the 1930s. And that
I know that one.
Wait, wait, wait. No, no. Sorry, but we have, okay, now.
Yeah. Should I just play it?
Now, this is the leader song. The song. That's it. This is the lyric. Leishisa, atom kitaran leishisa, kazing kumhaira, liru rahaira, kapai wonli yankalu, mayang wonli yankalu, atom kitaran, ning matan mesa, iram vaikuli kawararong tada. This this is the lyric. Now what happens is, these are elderly people who sang with the song for me. I met them personally 4 years ago, but no one is alive now. Sad to say. And this is happening with most of the songs, because with the elders passing away, even our archives of repertoire of performance or song vanish. The conflict here as a researcher is it really important for me as a researcher to revive? Am I even attempting to revive those old festivals? Maybe not. But it is an attempt as a researcher to at least not just document it, but at least try to attempt to reconstruct. Now, in that reconstruction is where the negotiation comes. Negotiation between me as a researcher and also the community as a researcher, going through some kind of a negotiation. And the question directly comes back to what Philip has mentioned before about the good life. The question of, am I a good person? Am I a good Tangku that if I attempt to go back or try to reconstruct to that old way of life? And this is one of my questions in my PhD, where I talked about the personhood of the Tangku. Because the Tangku's personhood in that way is constituted through the performative act of how he has presented himself in his lifetime. Not just that, even after his lifetime, as to how people remember him through songs and through performances during his funerary rites. Also by erecting a memorial stone to him, where a lot of performances involved. Okay. With that, I will end my presentation. I think we can continue having the conversation later. Thank you. Oh, sorry. I can show you the photographs. Yes, I'll show you the photographs. This was in 2024. This is a Luru festival in one of the villages in Khartoum. The next one, there are many thousands like this available now, but there's only one of this on Tisham Festival, where these two dancers, they are performing the dance, especially for the dead. So they are actually the representative of the dead during the festival. Right? So with that, I will end the presentation.
So thank you very much. You are adding another layer with the accents that somehow makes it intensity when we hear. So we have 15 minutes for discussion. Obviously, we will have our present presentations back after William's presentation as well. So we don't manage to finish in time. We may take up some aspects later on. Questions, resonances.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Okay. Go ahead.
Just that, last year I was in Brazil, and I'm Brazilian, and I was watching a lecture about the literature and Brazilian authors, and the lecturer said that in Brazil we don't learn to read by reading, but we learn to read by music. So it was very nice to hear Felipe and remember a lot of other samba and other music plays, because I really think that it resonates with our identity. When we listen to music and listen to music that is very older than our parents, our grandfathers, and our grandparents, but keeps a constructive identity of Brazil. It was very
Was also thinking about terms, I think yesterday when we talked about visual hegemony, and so I've studied at the music school before, and when I heard your presentations, I was thinking that there is not only visual hegemony, like as character, but also hegemony being like orally created music, translated music, and written music. And I think that's another dimension that's interesting to think about when thinking about decolonizing, for example, the classroom, which we talked about yesterday. For example, because not every musical tradition is valued like this in the same way. So I really appreciate to hear of the different musical practices.
Thank you. Right.
I have a question. Felipe said that Samba's lyrics, they never talk about precarity, but always about resistance. And it makes me think about the question of memory that you bring on the table. Because at the beginning, Samba music was marginalized. And we can say that it's not marginalized today, but today we as Brazilian people, we have a different relation with it. It's more popular and played as a massive culture. And do you think that this thing, the fact that in some of the lyrics, they don't talk about the precarity and have this joyful, maybe, way of thinking about the things. Do you think it's related to this process of popularization, or what do you think that, why do you think that samba is popular now if it started as marginalized music? No, it's.
One lady cares of his.
Yeah. It's a tough question, but the thing that I'm thinking about specifically is this thing that you said about the fact that we don't talk about precarity in samba music. If you think it's related to this process of popularization, not popularization, but you know what I mean. Like it's not this marginalized today. Yeah, exactly.
People in summer complain a lot. They complain about everything. They
Yeah.
complain about the market. They complain about not having opportunity. Similar rock, car, pop music.
Yeah.
They complain about the news and difficult too. They complain a lot. But this, all these complaints are the main argument is they are proud of their culture. I shouldn't use there because I'm involved with it. But participating as well. But they are proud and they say we are culture. We are national culture. We should have more money, more things, and so on. But the argument is never related to the idea of precarity. It's always related to the idea that we don't have these things. And then they resist the political points of view and for the next one, action, emphasize the idea of resistance. It has to do with marketing. Despite the fact that some markets have huge market. Jardim, for instance, the one is true. It have true. That's all. Not say that some of them does have a market. That's it's a trick question. But musicians complain in general. Musicians are good complain. We are complaining. Correctly, we always have feeling that we have less than we should. Always. In everything. You know.
I think we have a question on our left-hand side.
I actually wanted to, it's more than a question, I want to comment something because I found, thank you very much for your presentation. I really love each one of them. And I was thinking about our previous session and the session that we have during this week. And so thinking also about the session about listening with Professor Loria. I was really thinking that that's amazing to have also the opportunity here to connect in a way all our question experience and the way also but new proposals, a new way also to understand this idea of resistance, right? I think each of you show us a way to think from music around this idea of resistance. I mean, samba as example of resistance, acoustic palimpsest also in a way, also the way how you construct your project. I found that really fascinating, and of course what the people are doing. And for you, Jerome, I was really impressed by the way that you reflect on your own project and on your community and your health position as an indigenous researcher. I am really, I just wanted to mention that ending with this discussion because we had also an amazing panel before that about resistance. I also invite you to, if you have the chance to read a little about it, one of our guests will read about this concept and just thinking about this idea also for us as students and also as young researchers, that can also help us to construct or to think about our own experience in this field. I mean, you are starting or finishing a master, and maybe you will stay here, academia. I don't know. I just wanted to mention that, and maybe to open this discussion for a more, I don't know, more question or input or comments.
Let me add something. We've gotten talked about very interesting concern about how this kind of music it's not alive anymore. So what happens? I remember a case of a music genre called Drongo, who was highly important among folk community and 20s, 30s of that century, and it simply disappeared. And there was a guy in the 80s, 90s, I don't know exactly the time, who said, I'm going to invent a jungle group. And they restructured he took the memories of his grandmother and the songs and reinvented, composed others, and jungle became a phenomenon in the market of popular culture and Greece. But it's very interesting because how these things have a circulation work, some of the songs work, but very interesting to see that there is resignification and things appear again, like a sonic motive or like it, depending on the action of people who might eventually recover and perform differently, of course, Richard Patton, but not all the time. But I just to share with you, because I remember a lot of this later project, I think we should have something like that. And one thing, they really did. No, this makes part. We know some songs which circulate, they have presentation. There are a lot of groups nowadays. It was very interesting the case that remember the situation.
Thank you very much for all of you. I found your presentation also very pedagogical, the way you presented, and I was touched by how you managed to share with us much pedagogy on what with which you are working. So thank you for this quality too. And I very much agree with you, Christelle. The more we are going into the Spring Academy, the more I'm thinking we need the same Institute for Global South Studies in friends, because it's really amazing to have this connection between geographies and disciplines. And to come to my question, I wanted to ask you what you would think maybe of the idea of Rizvana Bradley in her book Anti-Aesthetics, Black Aesthetics and the Critique of Form. In fact, she makes the whole critique of Western modern colonial aesthetics by saying that Black people always had kind of aesthetics or sensation, which was previous to its capture by Western modern colonial interior aesthetics as a knowledge regime, a power regime, an economic regime, a philosophy, one of the four. And I found somehow that in your different presentations, you showed us ways of the existences of the aesthetics despite or beyond the aesthetics colonial regime, different ways in different geographies, space, times, and so on. So I don't know, because with Vanna Bradley, it's very specific on blackness, so to speak, but this idea of aesthetics, could it be extended? I know that Adolfo and other people also work on this idea of decolonial aesthetics, not aesthetic. So what do you think about that?
I can't speak on the specific literature that you mentioned because I haven't read it well. But I was thinking about something that Carolyn mentioned yesterday, which was this idea of oculocentrism as a kind of colonizing force, the eye and the objectivity and the scientific backing of visuality, written text and objects and things. And I think something that draws all of our talks together is the significance of sound as a medium for transferring knowledge, circulating knowledge, independently of the written text. Which is part of why my presentation was kind of so potted, was because the sources that we get online or in archives, very kind of rare. Actually, it's circulated in oral culture. It's part of an orality. And so, in that sense, I think, I don't know whether I feel like I'm answering the question, but I can't remember specifically what the question was. But I think that basically we can think of this oligocentrism, sound and oral cultures as being a way of understanding anti-colonial, decolonial aesthetics. So what was the word?
Excluding aesthetics.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. The next one, quickly. There is context, and for me, within the context, I need to respond. In this sense, all the community have its own personality, within the context, the idea was mentioned about the good life, and that good life is not beyond. But within that context, you understand. But for me, in my research, that I have come across is that a good life, for instance, or a person who have achieved some kind of a person, in another word, really great, that someone who has been for very long, who has gone through a proper visuals, they have gone through marriage, we have built a house, we have also have a farm, also have a, who also have organized feast for the community. That is what I think is talking about. And it's not realistic. And I think if I get it from the content, it's what I will answer. For me, that's what I can think.
So we have one last question. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I really like you technical presentation, but in terms of people in terms of because how they truly have at home. Many of the music happens in events, proper events, not necessarily in the time of moment. Moments can be a very smaller thing in encounters, but event is something when it's commission that way. So if there is like a point where one can make a distinction between the moment and events in which this musical is getting accepted, I'm very quickly to get work happening. And yeah, I'm getting this for like some of the contract for a long time because we have focused students in our department, so we need to see him here. Yeah, so across Northeast, you have like Northeast India, you have some kind of new identity formation happening, not necessarily around song, but musical instrument that is becoming the marker of the identity of the group. So one connect to the song that can be perhaps, and this is happening also in very institutionalized ways. So to counter some kinds of like very institutionalized formation of identity, is there a way we can think through your kinds of like some kinds of speculations in that context?
Well, I'm not sure I could separate moments from events because when I say moment, I don't think necessarily very short duration of time. I in terms of life,
Yeah.
4 hours is very a short moment. I have good living. Yeah, it can provide a short moment. It could be 4 hours. It could be 1 minute. I've been doing a research about use of music in workplace. And eventually people report that putting sound on or singing briefly in the moment they are working. And that moment is kind of a fantastic song. So it could be less than 1 minute, it could be a kind of 6 hours. It could be a structured event like most of these other songs have. So it could be informal and random events that has happened. So an event would happen fast. So how long it's time is not too much for me. in the moment, I'm thinking now. Okay, but you can't all think further about that. I will make this proposition now. Like,
Yes, to respond to your question. Now, once the picture is instrument is fungible object. But for instance, like I was telling about this thing. With your party, even the story, even the knowledge story. Now, that is not possible in case because that is, I mean, that is not convenient for government. Yeah, right. But for a government to have a particular object, an instrument, more convenient to record, to archive, to document, and to keep to in a new document. So I think that's it. I think that is different and there is a challenge.
Thank you very much. Thank you all of you for sharing your knowledge with us. Now we would like to share some coffee with you and get back to
No, not that.
We are not coming back to this room. We are going
coming back.
upstairs. To room 327. But at first, I really want to thank to our team support, to technical support. You are we know you are really amazing, and yeah, thank you for all the presence. Thank you.